back for day three. Three of GDC Podcast Live. I am your co-host, Chris Graft, editor-in-chief of Gamasutra. I'm here with...
Hello, co-host, news editor and associate publisher at Gamasutra, Alyssa Macklin. Hello.
Hey, so why does it feel like, this is a virtual event, and it's the last day? Why does it feel like we were just at physical GDC for 5 days, staying up until 3 a.m. and drinking?
Yeah, like my energy level is about the same as it would be on like a final day of GDC, but like my legs feel a lot better because I'm not like running up and down escalators. So notable improvement there. Yeah,
my legs my legs are doing okay, all things considered.
Missing out on my yearly workout though, so.
yeah. I didn't get too many steps in during the virtual, but what do you think? I mean, I really like it.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's been a great event. As someone who writes talk coverage, the ability to watch an on-demand talk right away or like within 15 minutes is just like, I'm not going to be able to come back from this. I'm spoiled. It's too good. Which is something that more people should be talking about. If there was a talk you liked earlier on, you can go back and just watch it on demand. Or if you missed it, you can watch it on demand. It's great. It's amazing.
Yeah, we are completely unrestrained by physical boundaries now.
We have transcended the physical conference.
That is right. So hello everybody in chat. Thanks for joining us. We have a really great guest that I can't wait to get on, so I'm not going to wait. Except I'm going to make you wait because I want to do this intro. She co-founded the highly influential web-based gaming site and publisher Congregate with her brother in 2006 and sold it to GameStop, as one does. She's a free-to-play games expert. She's an International Game Developers Association board member, former and current GDC speaker whose talk should be available for free, like right now on the platform, founder of the newly minted Double Loop Games, and according to her Twitter profile, is a figure skater. And according to her, just because I'm going to be the judge here, she's just a fun person to hang out with. So let's welcome Emily Greer. Hey, Emily.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Thanks for joining.
With you, Chris. It was fun.
Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And great talk, by the way, which we will get into.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
As an aside, we've now had a pilot and a figure skater on the podcast, right? Do we have skydiver or was it pilot? David Gardner?
Yeah, David Gardner flies planes, does not jump out of them.
Okay.
As far as I know, if he didn't bring them up.
So interesting athletic hobbies. You're fitting right in.
Yes.
I hope that whoever is the pilot is a better pilot than I am a figure skater. I have more love than capabilities, but which is not a good thing when you're a pilot, but is just fine when you're a figure skater.
Yeah, the heart that counts.
Yeah, but airplanes have wings. They can kind of coast if the engine dies. Figure skater just fall on. I know what I'm talking about.
Fly. Sure. That's the thing that people don't appreciate. It actually hurts so much less to fall on ice than on pavement. I look at skateboarders and I'm like, how can you do it? With a figure skater, you just like slide 10 feet and it's not that bad. It truly is not that bad.
That sounds painful. Thank everyone for joining us for the ice skating podcast.
No, I feel like there's a game dev metaphor there, but I'm not going to go down that whole rabbit hole.
Yeah, sliding on your butt on ice is not that bad. So, okay, Emily. Anyway, can you tell us a little bit about your storied history in games? How did you become involved in the game industry?
I came in a kind of a weird way. I think actually that's true of a lot of people, but I think mine was particularly weird. I had a 10-year career in catalogs and e-commerce doing what would now be called data science and UA before, but it was called direct marketing then. And then my brother, who'd been in the game industry since he dropped out of college to work on Ultima 7, had the idea to start Congregate. And I started helping him with his business plan and thought, this is a good idea. This is going to be a lot more fun than mailing the next million catalogs to somebody. why don't I work in games instead of cutting down trees, and volunteered as his co-founder. So that was my first entry into games. And I played games all along, but I don't have that core gamer identity that most people in the industry have, which is, I think, something that is unusual about me, but also I think has been a strength through the career. So yeah, we built, as you talked about, we built up Kongregate as the web platform. After we sold to GameStop, I ended up taking over as CEO, living out, every younger sibling's fantasy of like toppling their brother, off the throne. And then we built a mobile publishing business and published things like Adventure Capitalist and Animation Throwdown. And then, after 13 years, I'd been in the game industry and I'd done platform and I'd done publishing, but I'd never actually made games. And I really wanted to make games. So I ended up leaving Kongregate last year, took a little time off, and then co-founded a studio with my friend Shelby Moladina called Double Loop Games, making games for mobile.
Very awesome. I mean, like Kongregate, like hugely influential, like, of course. So we can get back to that in a little bit, but since we don't have unlimited time with you, I want to talk about your session that you gave about workplace trust and team building and really anti-harassment steps that you can take. Can you tell us a little bit about the talk for those who weren't able to attend?
Yeah, we've, over the last few years, there's been kind of wave after wave, maybe about every 6 months, of stories coming out from different companies and really all over the industry of different Me Too stories and different harassment stories. And every time one of those came out, I would feel really depressed and sort of hopeless. And then I started thinking about, all the things that we did at Kongregate to make things better and to make employees feel safe and make it a place where we could stop harassment. And I was like, actually, that's probably useful advice for everybody. So I wanted to put together a talk that really gives a bigger picture of the problem of abuse and harassment, why it happens, why it's really damaging to the company more than people realize, and just really practical, pragmatic things you can do just to make the everyday experience of your employees better, but also to prevent abuse and harassment. So that was sort of the genesis of this talk, and it was good. And it also draws on some of my own experiences in the game industry with harassment. That's the crazy thing, is even though I've only ever been a founder in my own company, I still actually had, multiple cases of, gender and sexual harassment that I've experienced. So that combination of being both a leader and, survivor of it, I think is gave me a great lens to talk about it.
And I know the people who watch it really appreciate, you coming forward about those things, because those are those incidents that happen, because I know that's difficult to talk about, but it does make people feel not alone, so we all appreciate that.
Well, I know with you said that you built this based on, or your talk was kind of built around your own experiences and kind of things that you've come to realize from your own time in the industry. Why do you think that like other companies have maybe not been able to come to the same realizations on their own? Is there just missing conversations, or just the company buildup, or what's the common factor there?
When you're running a company, there is so much day to day just to survive and to build and deal with immediate crises. It's hard to take that step back and really think about how the system is working more broadly. While I did come a lot of it from my own experiences and things that we've done at Kongregate, a lot of that was reacting to my own experience. And again, the fact that I had experienced it, I think, made it easier for me as a leader to intuit what kind of steps would make it better for employees. There's also a lot that I talk about that really doesn't have to do with abuse and harassment. It's just good practices from team building. I talk about Google and their research on psychological safety and how it makes more effective teams. The Games Outcomes Project, which you guys at Gama Sutra had a great series of blog posts and was a GDC talk. They've also looked at it. So some of these things people are already figuring out. They're just not necessarily connecting it to the abuse and harassment. The other thing is that I did rely a lot on research. When I decided to do this talk, I took time over actually probably about 6 months reading as much literature as I could. I got my professor mother to download all sorts of academic articles for me off of JSTOR. I didn't link to any of them because they're not freely available, but they were helpful for me in terms of understanding it more broadly. And in particular, there was a US EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, did a study in 2016, which is just a wealth of knowledge and information. And I linked to that on Twitter and from the talk. And that was a really big help to sort of get my sort of brain around it.
Do those wider kind of academic articles for other industries and for just like employment as a whole, do those have a lot of parallels with game development, or is it quite different?
For the most part, it's really similar. Now, there's some situations where they talk about, domestic workers or, satellite retail stores, which are, relevant to something like GameStop, but not. It's rare to have sort of 2 or 3 person little pods that are remote in game industry. So some of that stuff is specific to them. Some of that stuff is specific to manufacturing. But because the core of the problem comes back to humans' desire for power and desire to push people down to raise themselves up. That's just incredibly universal. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter whether you're looking at, high fashion or movies or games or a retail store. A lot of the same themes keep coming out.
Mm-hmm. The way that you talked about the power dynamic was really interesting to me. You say that we have some misconceptions of what drives harassment. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So especially when you're talking about Me Too, a lot of the stories involve kind of sort of lurid sexual type of stuff, and it's very easy to think that's about sex and about people being driven by sex and wanting sex. Because, again, that's a universal thing that we feel. But the more that you look at individual stories and you look at the individual patterns, sex is almost a symptom rather than the cause. It is about that feeling of power that you have when you force somebody into something, when you put them on their feet, when you control them. And so with women, when it's male to female in particular, it's nearly always power, sort of oppression and power dynamics. When you're trying to push somebody down, you use sexual language. It seems to be very common. Men to men, it will often happen as well. And then it tends to be, like homophobic slurs and other types of things, but also pushing men into, female gender as a way to push them down. And then it gets into all sorts of other things. So sex and sexual language is often just a way similar behavior is expressed. I'm trying to keep this clean because it's a podcast.
No, it's fine.
But, yeah. When male to male, it might be, you're a total fucking idiot, right? And, homophobic slurs, niggers, and then with women, it's about sex. But it is always about you're less than me. I'm making myself bigger in relation.
Mm-hmm. So I also want to ask about this whole theory of one bad apple, which you talked about. And, people say, the bad apples are gone now. You see it happening in companies now. There's a little tiny bit of a culling of like people who've been caught. But what are your thoughts on the one bad apple idea?
Yeah. One is that it can't be just one bad apple if we're seeing it in so many companies of so many different sizes in so many different regions. It's coming up again and again. It's hard, the actual analogy for one bad apple is that one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. It's actually about one poisonous thing making everything around it worse. And that's actually a better analogy. If you think about it, that is much more what is going on. The other thing is, there's a lot of denial about it. When Me Too really broke in 2017, I think a lot of people were surprised at how really common these kinds of experiences were. And we've been pushing things kind of under the surface for a while. And so there's a desire, and part of that is that there's a real desire for things to be okay, for things to not be a problem, and to not have to think, bad things about your coworker or bad things about your friend. It's also much easier just to put things all in one individual than think about systemic problems and how things interact. And one of the things I talk about in my talk is that, harassment isn't binary where, it happens or it hasn't happened, it's illegal or it isn't illegal. There's a whole spectrum of behavior that starts with mean trash talking that nobody would ever consider illegal, but is sort of the beginning of that kind of, abusive talk. And then you can, get to, people giving each other ball taps and other things like that before you get to harassment. And that's the other problem. When you say something is one bad apple, it's just this easy problem. You get rid of them, you find them, it's over. But when you really look at it, and it's this whole spectrum of behavior, and a lot of people have behaved that way to some degree, then it's just much harder to deal with. And that's one of the things where I think it's really important to understand is that we all live up or down to our environment and surroundings to some degree. Nobody's a saint. Nobody is complete evil. I mean, there's probably
shades of gray. Yeah.
But most people, we're just doing the best that we can in the environments that we are in, and we're looking around us to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And so when things are sort of gradually moving in a bad direction, a lot of us will move with it too. But that also means that if we can move things in a good direction, and we can move a lot of people too as well. So there's sort of the upside and downside there, is that we're moving as a group one way or another. Group norms are really powerful, and that you need to think about the group behavior and not just the individual.
Yeah. Somebody in chat, Cherry, said almost like we have a systemic problem, eh? Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about Emily's general theory of human behavior? That was interesting, and it's good that you name a theory after yourself. I haven't done that yet, but I need to figure mine out.
Well, I didn't, mostly as much as possible. I try to give references. I try to give backup, but this is just me talking.
Yeah.
And so
but you had graphs and everything. I mean,
yeah. Well, I am a stats geek. I had a chance to bell curve in. Of course, I'm going to do that. I bell curve and Emily's theory. That's me. I'm staying on brand even when I'm talking about a heavy subject. But yeah, I talked about it a little bit before. It's essentially that there's some percentage of people that will always be good in some situation, and there's some people who will always be predatory, but most of us are in the middle, in a kind of bell curve around whatever the group norms were in. And group norms are set by leaders and by kind of the culture that we live in. And we there's not only so much we can do about the culture that we live in, but leaders can have a really disproportionate impact on how group norms bringing them for good. In some cases, I talk about big, huge games and what they've done there, or Uber being an example of leaders pulling sort of a lawlessness and sort of disregard for harm into being the norm for that company. And I think, I grew up moving all over the world and living a lot of different places. And I think when you have that experience of seeing people are people, but also how they behave organizes really differently in different places, it really helps give you that kind of distance of, oh, culture is not one thing. Culture is us coming together and not consciously deciding it's one thing, but iteratively deciding it's one thing.
So,
I was reading in chat. Someone's bullying the Gamma Sutra website design right now, and I was getting defensive.
Wait, oh wait, let's look at this real quick.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, but like you just gave a really excellent talk on that. So the better option would be just to have people get your full thoughts in thoughts in your talk.
Yeah, that I had time to rehearse and more.
I was going to be like, all right, what are your quick tips for fixing studio cultures? I'm like, that's not the way to handle it.
Sure it is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think that maybe we should talk a little bit about double loop games and things that on the business side of what you do. Can you talk about tell us a little bit about double loop and what you're trying to do differently there?
Yeah. So double loop comes back to kind of my experience as a gamer, somebody who plays games a lot, who really enjoys them, but doesn't have that core identity, that core gamer identity. And for a long time, in the game industry, I sort of felt like I had a certain level of imposter syndrome. And then we started doing mobile publishing, and the team would joke about the Emily test. The games that I played more than 6 or 7 sessions were always our hits. I was like, the team wasn't going to sign Adventure Capitalist for mobile, and I was like, no, we have to. I can't stop playing it, right? And that made me realize that what had felt like, what was giving me imposter syndrome was actually a strength. I represent the big mass market of mobile players who play games and love games, but don't think of themselves as gamers. And there's no part of the games industry that's not competitive, but if there's one part of the market that's underserved, it's that part. And I want to make games for that audience. I want to do what most people in the games industry want to do. I want to make games for myself. And that it really focuses a lot around, why I play games, which is when I'm most stressed. That's when I'm on my couch playing, match threes and tower defense and idle games and have basketball or the British baking show in the background. And so I want to make really relaxing games, and I want to make games that are really social and that help connect us to people and bring those two things together. So we're not talking about the title that we're making yet because there's a lot of cloning in mobile. So when you do something innovative, you try to, keep it close to your chest until you absolutely have to show it. But that's the general sort of mindset that we're taking to it. We're still a small team, which is really fun. Congregate was like 120 people towards the end, and it's lovely to be back to, the number of people you can fit around a table and really talk to. We're about 8 people right now. And yeah, we're hoping to launch sometime in 2021.
I feel like when you hear people talk about games in that category that are like the casual games, like the Farmvilles or like sitting on your couch with your mobile phone, kind of like the mom games. I don't like that term, but I know like kind of where it comes from, that you hear about it as like, oh, here's this untapped market. Here's how to get women into games and how to make money off of them. But you guys seem to be taking a lot more like personal, we just want to create something enjoyable approach with it.
Yeah. I think the best games are always made with real emotion and real respect and understanding for the audience. And I want to take advantage of the fact that I am that sort of mom gamer in the games industry. there's not a lot of us in the games industry for lots of reasons. And I really think that we, and Shelby is also, my co-founder is also a mom. I'm not a mom, actually. I'm a mom.
I love those types of, I'm not a mom either, but that term defines me.
Yeah, but that, that we can, but because we're the audience, we can make better games, and more sort of authentic and joyful games, because we're not guessing what somebody likes. We know what we like. We know who they are, and we think we can make better games. And
it's a refreshing perspective. I'll say that much about it. It's nice to hear it, how you guys have phrased it, and your press release when you guys announced your seed funding was just this really heartwarming way of describing a market that I feel doesn't usually get that kind of loving attention.
Yeah, I don't want to call anybody out, because there's lots of amazing games out there that I've played a lot of, but it's something that I struggled with in the industry, is feeling like the kind of player that I am, and that kind of audience is less respected. And I think it's
a great audience.
Yeah. And our needs are just as valid. And I'm here, and I want to make games on that premise.
Yeah. Well, when you're going around and you're trying to raise funding for this, when you tell them what kind of audience you are targeting, is there a reservation? Do you have to really argue for it, or?
No, I mean, the numbers are just there. The mobile is half the game industry now. I mean, and that's just meteoric growth in the last decade. And when you look at surveys of the US market, 70% of people who play games on mobile don't think of themselves as gamers. You're talking about 70% of the market. It's hard to deny it. And I also think that one of the changes that I've seen since we raised money for Congregate in 2006 is that there is more appreciation of that the game audience is broader than what originally was thought to be, and that diverse founders and diverse voices can help fill that gap. I didn't really believe in sexism until we raised money for Congregate, and it's actually been really lovely going through the double loop process to feel a big reversal on that. Now, it helps that I'm a repeat founder. VC's always like that, but I think that there was an attitude shift even independent of that. And I have a lot of female friends who are starting studios now and able to raise money in publishing. There's just a whole wave of us that I think will be helping to change the industry going forward.
Yeah. What parallels do you see right now versus 2006 when you founded Congregate? Are there any parallels you see with the mobile game market, or is it just a completely different ball game?
It's such a different ball game. And, in 2006, we were all still on feature phones, right? I was playing Bejeweled on, my little Nokia.
Snake.
And, and the mobile games market was controlled by the carriers, and Jamdat, EA had just bought Jamdat.
Wow,
and mobile was really just not even a gleam in the eye or barely a gleam in the eye in terms of being half of the industry. And the other thing is that free to play was nascent. It was really growing in China and Korea, but it hadn't come to the West yet. And so the amount of change that's happened in the industry in 14 years is kind of astounding. And it's been a fun ride. And it's also been one where, every year it's been about expanding the game industry and expanding the audience and getting bigger. And it's lovely to be in an expanding market, as opposed to one where, it's a shrinking market where everybody's defensive. This is in a growing market. It's easier to be optimistic and collaborative and lots of things like that I like.
I'm kind of keeping an eye on chat at the same time, so I apologize if I'm re-asking the same thing that Chris just asked. But considering how much experience you have in like the PC and like browser-based games, are there a lot of parallels to mobile games in those kind of like how the players are, how the games are formulated?
Yeah, I mean the browser games in the late 2000s, or like 2007 when we launched through 2013, that was where you went to play sort of the quick games, when you wanted to play a game for like 10-minute sessions and to feel that, see the innovation in terms of mechanics, and it was sort of the most accessible path compared to consoles, or doing a big heavy download when your internet sucked. Browser games was the accessible format, and now mobile is the most accessible format, so that's where you see the biggest audience. But browser games aren't dead. They're the most accessible format of PC. It's been pretty traumatizing to have Flash go away.
Yeah.
But HTML5 and a lot of other technologies have really developed, and you can make quite good games for browser now. And as long as kids are allowed to do their schoolwork on computers but not allowed to play on phones or consoles, browser games will never die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
cool. I think math games.
My circle in high school definitely got like all of the good like congregate level sites blocked because of just the sheer volume of time we spent on it there. So
one of the secrets of Congregate is I think we because we didn't have our name and our title, we were less likely to get blocked by school administrators than other sites. So we were kind of like the stealth game site you could play.
Mm-hmm. Generations appreciate that.
We stumbled into it.
Olivia Schweers in chat agrees. I grew up playing browser games. I didn't have a console for a while and no handhelds, so they were my gaming experiences.
Some really innovative Flash games that I remember playing that just had like that really good influence on you. But
it's actually kind of heartening that Flash games were such the disrespected backwater back when Congregate was at its heyday. It's like, oh, Flash games, they're not real games. But now with Flash dying, there's been so much appreciation of how much innovation there was and how much it was really like the birth of indies. And when you look both at mobile and at PC indie, there's so many threads of big hits that came out of Flash, like Meat Boy being an example, or Angry Birds is essentially a reskin of Crush the Castle. Like there's so much. Flash games gave so much to the rest of the industry, and I feel like it's getting a little bit more appreciated now that it's almost dead, because that's
sorry, no, someone just mentioned elf folding in chat and I just went all the way back.
Oh yeah.
It's nice to see like the preservation efforts that have like people have stepped up to archive these games, and that's really important. And it's that same like heartwarming feeling you were just talking about, that people do care about these still. It's just
absolutely.
Yeah. And so what's your take on overall on the, we've got like a couple of minutes here. What's your take on the mobile game market right now? Because there is a lot of reach, obviously, but that also means, there's a lot, it's inundated, it's very crowded. How do you deal with that as a startup?
I'm going to raise quite a bit of money is
okay,
one.
Nice.
So it's you have to break through the noise, but there's a lot of opportunity there. Like you are seeing new hits break out every year and get up into the top 10 and top 20. And if you look at it, because the market is so big, a lot of games are not necessarily famous, but are able to break through to a significant level and, really sustain a studio and grow. But, you have to make a great game that resonates emotionally, which is always hard, and you have to figure out the marketing side. And both of those are important. It used to get a lot more out of featuring. That was one of the things that was sort of that's been very hard to watch in the last few years, is how much the value of featuring has decreased. So you can't just build a business off of that. You have to figure out marketing. Now, I've spent my whole career in marketing, right? Like I did that that was what I did for 10 years before I even got into games. So it's sort of comfortable and familiar territory, but it's challenging. And it requires both, infrastructure and capital that makes it hard for, a small indie to break out in a big way. But that's the story, unfortunately, of most of the game industry, consoles and other things where consolidation towards bigger players. We were, in some ways, I think we were kind of spoiled for a while with how much diversity we could sustain, but that's not how markets work. They tend to crush that. But it is really great to still see how much diversity and how much interesting stuff goes on in especially the PC world, and both on Steam and places like itch. There's a lot of good small games. I think a lot of games doing well on Switch. So there's still a market there. Mobile, though, is definitely pretty dominated by big players.
Well, I think that you're going to do great. Got a pretty good track record, and you're pretty good with a bell curve. So I think that
we want to be on the good side of that, and then also we want that hockey stick curve. That's the kind of curve I want to draw for the business.
Well, we're going to have you back just to talk about different graphs and things like that. So,
but only in the audio format. You'll have to describe them verbally.
Yeah, the graphs with the Chris graft. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Just a reminder, this Emily's talk is free on this platform. So if you're listening to this right now live, you can go to it. Just look for Emily's talk from Thursday. It's also going to be, it's free for anyone to register and watch it too.
Emily's talk, which was called RESPECT, Practical Tips to Prevent Abuse and Build Team Trust, if you want keywords to look for.
Yeah, and that talk, ever since I learned the name of it, RESPECT, like that, the song has been stuck in my head ever since. So effective marketing. You are a marketer. So, and also there is a write-up on gamasutra.com, and it's kind of touches on a few points, but it also includes a link to Emily's full presentation deck along with notes. So please, take advantage of that. Show that to your coworkers. That's what it's there for.
I really had to squeeze to get it into 45 minutes. So there's stuff in the notes that I had to cut out and not say. So it's good to watch the talk, but it's also good to read the notes and see what things I had to cut.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thanks again. So we're going to take our a break for a few minutes for a word from our sponsor, and then the Gamasutra team will be back to just hang out. So we'll be in chat. Please don't go anywhere. And thanks again, Emily. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Up next, we'd like to welcome one of our sponsors, Julie Shoemaker, VP of Operate Solutions at Unity. Hey, Julie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Chris. Good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in the game industry and what you do at Unity?
Great. Well, I've had the pleasure to be in the game industry now 20 years. I joined Electronic Arts in 2001 on the licensing and advertising side, and have followed a journey through games, multi-platform, from social play and mobile, largely on the game publisher side. And in 2016, I was able to take that learning and come over to Unity and help do those services on behalf of the industry. In essence, my revenue responsibility in Operate Solutions spans from monetization products, largely the part of the business we're going to talk about today with the COVID-19 study, as well as cloud services, player engagement, which was one area where we pulled a lot of data about game behavior, and finally, of course, advertising. So my primary mission at Unity is to enable developer success so that they can build strong and profitable businesses.
Interesting. So you mentioned the COVID-19 report, and of course that's top of mind for a lot of people in games right now, and why we're doing this on video. So can you talk about that report and how Unity gathered that data?
Yeah, so Chris, I think when you and I started this call, before we clicked the video, we were just chatting about the new normal, and of course, we were watching what was happening in predominantly Asia as they were sheltering in place in January and February. So the week of March 8th, when World Health Organization declared global pandemic, is really when what we consider in the COVID report, the bulk of the shift in behavior and some of the data behind this. The methodology of the COVID-19 report is that we first started with a baseline growth to compare against 2019 as our baseline number. So in essence, to normalize what is already a growing industry of games, we took a normalized data set starting in Jan 1, and then we added mobile information that we secure from the Unity monetization platform on usage in mobile. We then also complemented that data with a source of information on PC and console gaming from our Made with Unity content as a development platform. And finally, we took player engagement data anonymized through our Delta DNA product that helped us see engagement rates as well as the revenue implications of COVID-19.
Okay, so when you're reviewing this data, what was the most surprising aspects of it that jumped out to you?
Well, first of all, many.
Okay.
I mean, we were humbled by this very difficult time in the world that games have shown that they're bringing a real bright spot. And so a couple of the data points that jumped out was, first of all, 46% increase in daily active users in PC and console gaming. And that data jumped out because it really shines a light on families, what we used to call like the virtual card or board game is now your Xbox in the living room with your family members. The bright spot in even mobile gaming, 17% increase in daily active users, just showed that people wanted this sense of community, sense of play, and of course, ability to focus on something that might be more positive for their mind share than what was happening in the world at the time.
And I saw the survey also showed increases in ad viewing and a really huge increase in app downloads, 84% increase, and
4% increase in downloads.
So can all of this is just because people are at home and having more downtime? Then is that the conclusion, or is there any other factors?
Well, I think what we look at is, first of all, if we think about the ad impressions, so ad impressions increased 57%.
Okay.
And in our category, ad impressions are often an opportunity of discovery for players. So if you're going to increase impressions, you're actually increasing the likelihood that they're discovering new apps and downloading those apps. Okay. So that's one thing. Another area, when we go back to that, 17% increase in daily active players also means new players, and new players have more room to grow in their what games I'm going to play. So we see that the increase in downloads is connected to many of the behaviors combined.
Okay. So when you're looking at this data, what are some practical ways, some takeaways that game developers can take from it? If they look at this report, how can they apply the information that they have to what they're doing?
Well, I think, first of all, we would say many of the game developers that have benefited greatly have been dual economy, and they have IP-based revenues, which have increased as well. And actually, IP went up 24% during this window. So that means consumer pay increased, as did ad pay. So the developers that have both economies did have greater opportunity during this time. And of course, also greater opportunity to engage the player, because often a player who doesn't want to pay has an opportunity to get a new level or grow their experience and engagement with the game through the rewarded ad business. So that would be one. Certainly on a forward-looking basis, our biggest guidance is that this is the opportunity for great game makers to engage this new pandemic player.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think happens after things, hopefully sooner rather than later, go back to normal, whatever that looks like? Do these numbers go back down, or do they go back down to where they were before lockdown happened?
Well, we see that the data shows during this now, 5.5 months of the window of deep look at the data, that that the users are continuing to engage. So our guidance would be we won't make a forward-looking statement on what players are going to do in the long run. But we will encourage our developer economy to take advantage of this opportunity to engage these players.
Thanks. That was really interesting. Thank you for joining us, and best of luck out there, and stay safe.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks. Hey, we're back. Thanks for sticking around with Julie Shoemaker from Unity. And thank you, Unity, for sponsoring this. I put a link in chat for that COVID-19 report, so make sure to check it out. And there will also be a link in the video on demand of this, so you can look at it then. So we're actually joined by Bryant, Francis, and Alex. Can you all introduce yourselves a little bit more in depth?
Bryant Francis, sometimes known in the Gama Sutra world as Bront. I'm a contributing editor at Gama Sutra, and as today has shown, I love Star Wars a lot, if you were watching the speed run.
What? Nice. I'm Alex Waro, an editor at GamaSutra.com, and I gotta say, the Gama Sutra retro design is about to come back into style.
Yeah, let's address. We had a question in the middle of our chat with Emily Greer, which she's amazing, isn't she?
Yeah, I wish you were able to join us for this last segment, but prior engagements and busy important people have busy important things.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky to have.
We are neither busy nor important.
I wasn't going to say it, but
yeah, I know we wouldn't be doing this if we were actually busy. The Cult Zone games. That's weird. Is that on the birth certificate, you think? Cult Zone games. When's Gama Sutra gonna renew the old site? Do you have an idea what they're talking about? I mean,
I think the blinking eye Gama Sutra logo that pops up every 6 months in Slack should be front and center on our site.
I haven't noticed that there's anything outdated on the site.
No.
When did our site get named again? When did we name it after a Southeast Asian Indian document?
We did not name it.
No, we were all later additions to the team. But I was looking this up yesterday, and 1997 is when Gama Sutra was founded. So,
what a fun fact. We should have all known that. We worked for this freaking site here.
I was looking it up to see
what were you all doing in 1997?
Yeah, let's talk about this. Bryant, you go first. Bront.
In 1997, let's see, 7 years old. I may not have even seen Star Wars yet, because I think my mom may have made me wait until I was 8. So I would have definitely been playing with Batman figures. I would have been in about 2nd grade, which means I moved to Laytonville, Maryland by that point. And I was getting bullied a lot in school. That's what I'm pretty sure of.
Nice.
Right. Watching anime and eating rocks because I was 5. I don't know what 5-year-olds do.
They're hardcore, apparently. Damn.
Wait, Alex. Okay, what were you doing?
I was just working a job, just punching a clock like any average. I must have been 11, 12. I don't know. No, I was
ready to write content.
That's right. I was just writing content from the day I came out of the. Isn't that the year the Symphony of the Night came out? I feel like 97. That's probably what I was doing. That's probably just spending my whole summer beating Final Fantasy VII and Symphony of the Night.
Speaking of timely things, favorite talks so far. What have you guys covered? What do you like? What's going good at the show?
I know Emily Greer, she brought up a lot of points in her talks, but I have to make it put that as one of my favorite talks I covered. She said something here in the podcast that she said specifically in the talk, which is harassment is sometimes about sex, but it's always about power. And when she said that, and I'm just sitting there, that clacky clacky, and I wrote it, and I swear to God, like mentally, my brain like shot backwards across the room into the wall from like linking things. Only because like if I can get a little personal here, I've lived that over and over again. I have been because it happens to men in the workplace too, and these aren't mostly at game companies because I've worked in other places, but I have been sexually harassed while I've been work. I've been yelled at and screamed at different jobs. I've had people I've had different kinds of like threats made at me in different contexts, and it's so weird because you spend a lot of time going like, holy, whoa, that was rough, and like you take a day, like you cool off, you're back at work for something or another, and the line like it's sometimes about sex, and it's always about power. And her story in the talk, which if you go watch, is about the random game exec who was inappropriately hitting on her at dinner. Just like the connection there like finally clicked in my head, and like I think I started like I've spent this year like processing a lot of what happened to me in that context, because when the news about a lot of game companies being called out this year for behavior that people have experienced at them hit, like I started like when writing up some of it, I was like, oh wait, I guess I've experienced this too. And like that turned out you need to like process that, and you need to like go deal with that in therapy. Like you can't just keep acting like, oh yeah, like it's just something I cover. It's not something I lived through. And it's like, oh no, I lived through that. And her framing of it that way, like I think about all the companies I'm at where people were power hungry, where people were like fighting for placement or favor. And I'm just like, even when it wasn't sexual harassment, I was just like, oh wow, Lisa Simpson staring.jpg. And that just, I cannot stress enough. She talked about it earlier in the podcast, and that's why I was hoping she'd be here to mention it to her, that like, whoa, like that hit me like a truck. But she's not here, so I can just share with you, some deep dramatic secrets. And I'll throw it to Alex. Alex, no pressure. What's your favorite talk?
Men are garbage. That's my favorite talk.
Wow, so woke.
Yeah. No, that's rough, buddy. I'm sorry to hear that. It's bad times. I agree. Emily's talk was fantastic. I have not watched it yet. I was watching some other talks today, including a really good talk on Hard Space Shipbreaker, which is just a
love that game.
Sharp right turn. Yeah.
I would have mentioned that talk because I love the game. But
the name of that game just like twists my brain.
Are you going to spoil the end of a game right now that just recently came out?
What end? I can't beat it. I'm too busy carving spaceships.
I can tell you why there's no end, because I just watched the talk all about how that team had to pivot multiple times, including at one point moving from what was maybe going to be a more narrative heavy and shorter game into like a longer and more broad, like systemic game. And I don't know, people should go watch that talk on the platform because it's packed. It is really packed with a lot of key learnings. And yeah, it's just, it's a remarkable chart of how an idea goes from a game jam internally to a ship product that seems to have like a huge fan base. And I think it's really cool. It's really neat. It's nice to see studios thriving, the folks there at Blackbird. A key part of the talk was that they see themselves much in the vein of like a Blizzard or a Digital Extremes or a Psyonix, and that they work for other companies and they work on other IP, but they really are always trying to make their own original games and like strike it big. And so go watch that talk, because it would take me 10 minutes to sum up here, but basically they chart the 4-year journey from original idea to successful original IP. And I think that's really relevant these days, where so many devs are trying to get noticed with their own ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I talk about mine real quick? The one that I was I covered Karen Stevens from EA Sports, who is the lead accessibility lead. And the point that she kept driving home was that legibility is, like she said, if you get anything out of this talk, font like legibility, fix that. And that's my own, that's me like showing my own privilege there, because like I've got good sight, but we're here. But I do remember in 2006 when the HD consoles were hitting, Dead Rising, like nobody could read the text in Dead Rising 1 on Xbox 360. And here we are in 2020, right? Are we still? Yeah.
Yes, we will always be in 2020.
Some part of us.
So basically, when Emily Greer was getting her career started, up until now, font legibility has been like crap. And then,
what do you mean, Karen Stevens or Emily Greer?
No, I'm talking about Emily Greer's career. She started in 2006, and then,
okay,
frame of reference.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out like frames of reference for time. So yeah, just the fact that that's not a fixed thing yet is kind of mind blowing. And of course, her point is like you can add all these accessibility options, but if I can't, see the menu or recognize like where those options are living, where they're buried in the game, then they don't really matter to so many people. So yeah, I mean, and then the thing about Comic Sans, like, I think I'd heard that before and forgot about it. But looking up Comic Sans, I know that it's like maligned and stuff and made fun of, but it's good for dyslexia. And like designers, are like, shut up, stop making fun of Comic Sans. Like, this is good design.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, and then to have, and then, I know that there's probably, developers and like designers out there just imagining their game just covered in Comic Sans, but yeah, she said, the option would be good. You can have the fancy font and you can turn on a more legible font as well. And she also brought up the point, like, a game like Outer Worlds, it defaults to a very small font, and then they released a patch that increases it, but it still defaults to that original like tiny font. And she said just because you add a size option doesn't mean that you're off the hook for making it illegible from when you start the game. So I'm like after watching that's just changed my viewpoint on legibility and really accessibility overall. It's been really enlightening this week. So yeah, that's me.
Alyssa, do you have a talk you want to bring up?
Yeah, but I also just want to comment. This is not a question, more of a comment. But it's I love talks like that because they recontextualize accessibility. It's people have this very like, oh, it's colorblind settings, but no, it's this wider range thing that affects like people who think that they might not need accessibility features, but no, they benefit from them too. All right, that's done. So now I will say my piece while we have 2 minutes left on the clock. Mm-hmm. I covered a talk by Private Division's Kari Toyama about, she set up a QA studio, and it was talking about how to set that up from scratch to kind of give your dev team the best chance and get like create a really productive environment. And I think my working title for when I was writing the article is Breaking QA Are People Too. Because a lot of her talk just comes down to treating developers like human beings and building community. Yeah. It's a really great talk that focuses on her 6 pillars that I can't find because I didn't organize my notes. Culture, diversity, relationships, advocacy, and trust. And there's a lot of advice that is focused on setting up a QA studio to make them feel included in the process. Because you hear horror stories of like, oh, they're kept in the basement with no lights and they're not allowed to make eye contact with the programmers. And that doesn't foster a great working relationship for people whose jobs actually overlap quite a bit.
God, and that's so frustrating with like, especially when you think about what Emily said. You read stories about how Activision used to be or other companies.
And if you start at the beginning of her talk too, she talked a lot about how Emily was talking about her own experiences with sexism, even as like a high up in games companies. And Kari was talking about a lot of her experiences. And it's just like, you're sitting there kind of like, no, I can see this happening, but that really sucks. And those bad, negative, and often sexist experiences kind of informed her philosophy for setting up the studio. And I think there's a lot of really great advice in that talk that applies not only to QA, but just to like studio culture in general. So please check that out. It was a really great conversation.
Yeah, sounds like it. And all of these like we wrote them up on gamasutra.com.
A website with a name.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody, especially people who showed up here in chat. Feel like, some of you have shown up every time, and we really appreciate that. This is a first time thing for us doing a live show, and hopefully we do it again. See some of you on Twitter and all that. So I think that that's it. We're going to sign off on the very first GDC Podcast Live. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good rest of your GDC.
Yeah,